All right. Um, I would say I am definitely not qualified to teach on having a stress-free life in the sense that I am stress-free. I would say I am able to teach on this because I relate to probably many of you in that, there are situations in life that bring out the stress in me. And so I have had the privilege for the last few months to research this concept of how do we get stress-free or at least move in that direction. So I've been researching it, learning about it, trying it out in my own life. And I cannot tell you that I found the secret to not struggle with stress. However, I have learned to actually struggle with stress. Because I think the way we think about stress is kind of like as if we're a victim to stress, it's what life throws at us, and we can't help it at all. But that doesn't have to be the case. And maybe you're thinking, wait, isn't stress, isn't that just like a part of life? And to that, I would say yes and no. In one sense, life is always going to have, challenges that are extremely difficult, different trials in them. And we'll talk about one aspect of stress that is good. We want a certain kind of stress in our life. But on the other hand, stress is just our response to life. Think of it this way. You probably all know those people in your life who seem to get really stressed about the little things, the small things. I used to work a lot with junior high girls, and they remind me of this because they will have, on their plate of things to do, like a whole one project, one assignment, and they are so stressed out. And I want to tell them sometimes, girl, life is going to get a lot harder than this. There's going to be a lot more thrown on your plate. And that's especially if, they sleep in on the weekends. They have time to paint their nails every other day. They text all the time. I am all the time. They have all this time to do all this stuff. And yet if you talk to them, they truly are stressed out. And it's because of how they're handling the situation, how they're processing the situation. And so if that junior high girl is like right over here, and you are, I'm sure, past that, whether you're over here, here, you're further along. And I'm sure you can think of people who are also further along than you, people who handle life with a calmness about them. They handle what's on their plate better than you do. And so we all have room to grow. We all are able to handle more with calmness. Whatever's on our plate in this season of life, we can handle it. And we can do it without being all uptight and irritable about what is right there for us to do. So hopefully we will learn some of those tips. You'll probably see on your paper, hopefully there's like 10 things there that we will get to. We'll talk about ways that we can be more stress-free. But the way I'm going to do this has potential to be slightly painful. I know this because I read a book that did this. It's a book about a problem that I'm aware is a problem. And so I'm reading this book, and it spends the whole entire first half of the book talking about the problem, defining the problem, explaining how it shows up, telling me it's horrible, telling me the bad effects of this problem. And it takes me all the way to like page 120 to finally get to the point where it tells me how to solve the problem. But you're so ready, right? When you get to that point, you are so ready to hear the answer on how to fix this problem. And that's what this morning is going to be like. I'm going to define stress. I'm going to explain stress, explain how it comes up in our lives, what are the negative effects of stress, get you to identify your stress, and then finally you'll say, yes, how can I get rid of the stress in my life? So that's what this morning is going to look like. So what is stress? You have a spot on your little paper. If you want to write this down, you can. It may be considered as any physical, chemical, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental unrest. And if you looked it up on the internet, you would find lots of different definitions. But that's just a simple one that kind of encapsulates them all. Basically anything that causes bodily or mental unrest. And how it works medically is stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's exactly what you need. If you were to have some kind of threat come into your life, something we might call a really stressful situation, a critical moment, your body would respond in an amazing way. It would send an alarm in your body so that impulses and hormones would go throughout your body to help you respond in the best way possible. these hormones, they're often called stress hormones. They cause your body to respond by having your heart beat faster, your muscles tighten, your blood pressure rises, your breath quickens, and your senses become sharper. So what it does is it increases your strength and your stamina. It causes you to focus more. It causes you to have more energy. It speeds your reaction time. And not only that, it also, this is really cool, your body stops focusing on the things that it doesn't need. You know, like your digestive system isn't needed in a critical moment, and so that slows down. Or your reproductive systems, or your growth systems. All these things that aren't needed in those critical moments, your body stops focusing on those things, and instead, it allows you to be alert and be able to do what you need to do in a stressful and critical moment. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, if a dog started chasing after me that was going to bite my leg, I would need to run fast. And that stress that would go through my body would cause me to know where to go, to run faster, to go harder, and to just have everything I need in that moment. Or, you know, as moms, I'm sure you've all had the situation where something bad happens to your kids, and you just have an ability to react like you didn't know was possible. You know, your kid breaks a bone, so you have 4 kids. You're able to get them in the car, get all your stuff, do it all in like 3.5 minutes, get them to the hospital, and it normally takes you, 20 minutes to get in the car or something? But you look back and you're like, that was a big blur, but I had everything I needed. I was able to respond exactly as I should. Stress is really cool in that way. Even, you know, in the sense of just a deadline of a project or something, you're able to focus, to have the energy you need, you're able to work hard. So it can be a really good thing. But the problem is, there is a different kind of stress, but our body doesn't necessarily distinguish the difference between them. Our body doesn't necessarily know if it's that really critical moment where there's like a physical threat, or if it's when you're just handling life as if there's a threat, but it's really not a threat. You know, it's like the everyday situations where we overreact and we act like everything's not going right, everything's such a big deal. To some extent, our alarm is turned on either way, whether it's that critical moment or whether we're just overreacting to life. And we'll talk about why that's bad. But I want to describe that kind of stress so you see what we are talking about. Because we're not trying to get rid of the stress when your kid breaks their bone and you need all of that to get you going to do the right thing. We're talking about the kind of stress that's the overreaction to life. So think back to that definition, or you can look up there. Basically anything that causes unrest. I'm sure you can think of things that cause unrest in your life that are not those crazy critical moments, such as just too much going on in your life where you feel like, I have too much on my plate. There is more there than I can handle. Or maybe it's, chaos going on in your home, messes and kids screaming and all of that. That can cause unrest in your life. Things not going well. You had expectations of how your day should go or what it should be like getting here in the morning, and it's not going well, and that causes unrest in you as you drive here. You're tense, you're on edge. And that's what the kind of stress is. You're tense, you're on edge, you're irritable, you feel like this is just too much. For lack of a better word, it's like you're freaking out to some extent. To some extent, you're like, I can't handle this. And that's inside of you, and it can last for minutes, for days, or it can last for long periods of time also. And when it does, when it lasts for not just a moment, that can have a really negative impact on our life if it happens too often or for too long. So I think you have a spot to write down any negative effects of stress. If anything comes to mind as I go to explain the negative impacts of stress, you can jot it down. I would especially say if you notice something that I say that you're like, oh, I have that, I'm really that way, write it down because maybe it is related to stress as we go throughout the morning. You might see that. So, all right, one medical website about the negative effects says, the long-term activation of the stress response system and the subsequent overexposure to cortisol, which is that stress hormone, those stress hormones, they can disrupt almost all of your body's processes. This puts you at an increased risk of numerous health problems. So that's a really general one. WebMD, you're probably familiar with, says that it can be linked to headaches, an upset stomach, back pain, and trouble sleeping. It can weaken your immune system, making it harder to fight off disease. If you already have a health problem, stress may make it worse. It can make you moody, tense, or depressed. Your relationships may suffer, and you may not do well at work or school. And that's one of the smallest lists that I found as I was looking up what it can do. Other effects that were mentioned in the different sites I saw were stress makes you more tired, more prone to anger, anxiety, obesity. It worsens skin conditions. You're easily tense and irritated, restless, forgetful, impatient. It causes muscular tension or pain, chest pain. It can cause lack of motivation or focus, and you can be more prone to substance abuse. Sounds horrible. And that's not even to mention, don't we all just hate being stressed out? I mean, who wants to be living irritable and on edge all the time over things that aren't worth being that way? None of us want to. And it's not even necessary. I mean, you can picture that. You know that's true when you realize there can be a situation and one person can stress out about it while the other person has the exact same situation and they're not stressed about it. Same situation, and yet one person is and one person isn't. So you don't have to be stressed out in this non-necessary, stressful kind of way. Again, we're not talking about those critical moments. It's not even helpful, right? I mean, I think of my own life and when I tend to be most stressed. And it's, one of those days where your list of to-dos is long. Maybe you have deadlines for other things. And usually the kids, they're worse than they normally are. Everything, it just seems to be more difficult. And so I'm, more on edge about it, more irritable. Usually the worst part for me is I tense the muscles in my neck, and that constricts your nerves, and then I get a headache. And that headache will last for days. The stress was only there for however long, and that headache gets to remind me of it for the days beyond the stress. And what good, What good did that possibly do me to stress out in that moment? I was only, I'm sure, more not kind to my children. I was only more upset about my to-do list. I was less productive by getting stressed out than if I chose not to stress. And I could have, because there are times when I can handle all that and I don't stress, but the times that I do, it is so not helpful. Okay, now I want to add my 2 cents to what I've learned about this. The other stuff I say, you should definitely say that's credible. Now here is my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. You're not going to find this anywhere else on the web, I'm sure, about stress. But consider it. I would say stress tells us something about ourselves. As much as we like to think that we are very giving people and we are constantly serving everybody else around us, I think stress can say something about us that maybe we're more selfish and self-focused than we like to realize. And it's hard to see it in ourselves, but you can see it in other people. When you ask them, how are you? They're like, oh, I'm so stressed. I have this to do, and I have this to do, and I have this to do. And the next time you see them, oh, I'm so busy. I have this and this and this and this. And they're constantly talking about what they have going on. They have so much on their plate. They're so stressed out. And you look at that and go, oh, you're kind of selfish or you're kind of self-centered. And we don't say that necessarily all the time out loud, right? We don't always say, I'm so stressed, I have this and this and this. But if we're always thinking it, we're always thinking about our to-do list, we're always thinking about how things aren't going right for us, we're always having these expectations, and then they don't get met, and then that makes us all upset and irritated. I mean, what does that say about us? We're thinking a ton about ourselves, and that is kind of what's causing the stress sometimes. I'm not going to claim that's every stressful situation. I'm sure it's not. But it could be, right? I mean, we could just be sometimes a little too focused on ourselves. Or maybe it's just that you're not handling what's on your plate well. And for those of us who like to handle a lot, like we want a lot on our plate and we want to do a lot, that can hurt our pride as well, right? That it's too much. We can't handle this much. We got to take some things off of our plate. So either way, stress is not something that we should pride ourselves in. I think what I've noticed is sometimes women wear that as a badge of honor. Like we talk about someone like, oh, she's so stressed out. She has all these things going on. And we're like, oh, she has all these things going on. She's such an awesome woman. It's like, no, let's not think of that as like, woohoo, badge of honor. She's so stressed out. Instead, it's showing that we're not handling things as we should, that we're either too self-focused or it's too much for us. So let's stop trying to be like, woohoo, I'm stressed, and let's try to get rid of it. Okay, now on your paper, there's a spot to identify your stress. I'm sure nobody now wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I have stress because now I'm a selfish person and I don't handle things well. However, it is time to identify it because if you don't identify it, you cannot get rid of it. So that spot there is for you to actually identify it right now if you can. And maybe just write really small so people don't think you stress out a lot. You only fill up a little tiny bubble rather than the whole thing. But if anything comes to mind already, go ahead and write it down. Anything that you notice, yeah, I think I do stress out in these certain ways, but I'm also going to give you some ideas so that if nothing comes to mind as I say things, hopefully something will. All right, because it does have a way of hiding itself. I found that out. I didn't think I was that much of a stress case until I studied stress, and then I was so aware of it, and I was like, wow, I stress so much more than I thought I did. Because I think we have busy lives and it just hides itself in there. We just are on the go, and not realizing that we're tense about everything that we're doing. Okay, so remember that. Maybe it's hiding itself. All right, when do things feel like that? Think of yourself as a mom. It's easy to start there. We all have that situation where kids, they demand a lot. Is there anything that you can think of in the realm of being a mom that stresses you out? Maybe specifically, I don't know, that hour of right before dinner when they just woke up from a nap and they're all grumpy and everybody's complaining and grumbling and you're trying to make dinner. Something like that. Does that stress you out? Or when you are trying to focus on something and your kids keep needing your attention. They're distracting you. Let's go to the area of responsibilities. Maybe when there's deadlines or bills to pay or you have a tight schedule. Does that stress you out? Remember, write things down as you hear of them if they relate to you. Or maybe you want your house clean, and why does it keep getting messy? It just keeps getting messy. Does that stress you out? Relationally, do you stress or get uptight after a conversation where maybe you thought you said something wrong or you were perceived wrongly? Does that stress you out? Or if you're having a disagreement with your husband or a friend? Or how people view you. Maybe whenever you talk, you are worried, stressed out about how you're coming across to people. Or doing things the right way. Moms can definitely have that syndrome of wanting to do everything right. My kid needs to nap the right way. They need to sleep the right way. They need to eat the right way. They need to go to the right school. They need to have the right friends. They need to have the right teacher. And we get stressed about those things. And of course, it's not bad to have a care and concern for those things. But as you think of them, if you're less than calm, you're edgy about it, or tense when you think of those things, then it might have crossed over from concern to stress. Or the unknown, the health of family members or potential loss of jobs, the kind of worry-related things. Do those stress you out? All right, I'm sure there's plenty more. I'm sure you could all think of different things. I'm going to go ahead and let you take like 15 seconds. Write things down if anything came to mind or just hints of like, okay, think about this. Maybe you stress about this. Just write notes to yourself. 15 seconds. Go ahead. All right. Anyone ready to learn about how to not stress? We're already at that point. I'm ready. All right. Here we go. This is a list of 10 things. And I would say the key one is the one we're going to camp on the longest. But that's at the very end. So I'm going to go through these earlier ones a little bit quicker. If you looked on the internet, you would find tons of people's lists and ideas on how to not stress out. This is the one I've compiled from my own thoughts and my own trying to live it out. So you can go find other lists if you want, but here is mine. Number 1, remind yourself that stressing doesn't help. What's on your plate is not going to change because you stress out. It's only going to get harder. So there's a simple one. Remind yourself that stressing doesn't help. Second one, remind yourself it's also not necessary. It's not necessary. We got to get out of that victim mentality as if stress happened to me and I must be stressed. Rather, it's not necessary. I don't have to respond this way. It's not forced on me. All right, one more about stress itself is choose not to keep stressing. Choose not to keep stressing. We all, are going to have those weak moments where we do give in to stress for a little bit, and then we realize it, and what we've got to do is not stay there. I mean, remind yourself that it's way better to not be stressed. Think of what it's like outside of the stress, way out there. You know that life is better that way. So how can you get back over there where it's not stressful? And usually there is a way out. I think of simple things as a mom where there's those ways out and I can choose them or I cannot. Like Wednesday morning, I was driving over to Bible study. I'm supposed to meet somebody early, and things were just not going the way I wanted them to. I was supposed to be there at 9:20, and that got me there at 9:37, And I only got there at 9:37 because I was trying for 9:20. It just wasn't one of those good mornings, and it felt stressful. So I'm driving in the car, and I am just irritated that this isn't happening the way I wanted to. I don't know what I could have changed, but it's not good what's happening here. And I'm looking through chapstick in my purse, and my daughter goes, "Mom, what are you looking for?" I said, "Chapstick," and she's like, "Mom, we have lip gloss. Next time you can borrow one of ours. Do you want to take one of ours to church?" I was like, "Oh." And in that moment, I could choose to either stay irritated, "Thank you, Bailey," and then just keep staying tense, or I could go, "Oh, let that soften my heart," and move on. Life is okay, I'm 17 minutes late, not that big of a deal. Keep going, get out of that mode. We have to take that way out sometimes. Our kids say something funny, and we choose not to laugh because we're still stressed out. Why don't we just laugh and then move on? Don't stay there. You don't want to be there, so get out somehow. Find that way. Maybe it's just thinking a thankful thought. Sometimes that's all it does, is realize that there's a lot that is going right, even though some things are going wrong. And that'll help you get out of that stressful state. All right, some more practical things. Number 4 is have realistic expectations. As you look at your to-do list, you might not be as realistic as you initially think you are when you write 35 things on your to-do list for the day. And we all are moms of young kids, and some of us have multiple of them. And young kids take a lot of time. There's not a ton of time outside of young kids that we have for all these extra to-do things. And yet we put them on our list, expecting that we should be able to get them done, and then we get stressed out when they don't get done. So what we need to do is look at our life realistically. What are the ages of our kids? Are they sick? Are they needy? What is on my plate that needs to be there, such as taking care of my kids and taking care of my home and being a good wife and all of that? And what can I still add to that without adding too much, not overdoing our expectations of ourselves? So we'll get rid of a lot of stress when we start having realistic expectations of ourselves. All right, next one is quite obvious. Be organized and plan ahead. And even though it's obvious, when we don't do it, we see the detriment of it. If we do it, then when those inevitable time crunches come up, we are more ready and we're less stressed out. Simple thing like stay up 10 minutes later to make your kids' lunches so that when you're running out the door, you're not 10 minutes later. You're only staying up 10 minutes later, which I'm sure you would have spent doing something else. Just do that one thing, and then when you go to get out the door the next morning, that's one huge less thing that's going to save you a bunch of time. So just those simple things. How can you be organized so that when the time is clicking, you got 5 minutes until you got to get out the door, more things are done than would have been if you did not plan ahead. So be organized and plan ahead. All right, another practical one, really broad, but make healthy choices. Studies show that bad eating, bad sleeping, bad habits all make it easier to stress. If we're making healthy, everyday choices, we're going to be operating at our best. We're going to have more chance, to be patient, having a longer fuse. We're going to have more chance to keep going rather than to give up because we just feel too wiped. So just make those everyday, healthy choices. And number 7, related, but it's even more broad, use common sense. Meaning, we stress out, but then we find ourselves talking to the negative friend that stresses us out. and we spend a lot of time with her, and she makes us feel stressed out about our life, and she talks about our life this way, and then we get stressed out. Well, hello, use common sense. Maybe she's not the best friend to talk to all the time, or at least in certain situations. Or, maybe we listen to certain kind of music or watch certain kind of movies, and they don't head us in the right direction, at least. So use everyday common sense. And if you're stressed out or you tend to stress, how can I get rid of those things that lead me a little more to stress than if I made a different choice? Okay, now to my 3 favorites. Next one is accept that you don't have ultimate control. And we know it's true because if we had ultimate control, we would never have stress because everything would be exactly as we wanted it to be. We'd have the control to make it happen. And this especially has relevance if you tend to stress after something has happened. So you're like an after stressor. You're looking back and you're like, why don't I have control? Well, yeah, you're not God. You don't have control. So stop getting irritated that you don't have control because you don't have control. You're just going to have to accept that. There's nothing you can do about it. You don't have ultimate control. You cannot control the fate of your children or where things go or who says what or, so much is out of your control. So you're going to have to just accept that. Otherwise, you're going to be a stress case every second of your life. All right, number 9 is keep perspective. Keep perspective. Meaning, as you start to stress about something, ask yourself, does this matter really this much? I mean, is this going to matter in 5 years? And that's a long time away. Is this going to matter in 5 years? Okay, maybe it matters in 5 years. Is it going to matter in 10 years? Yeah, for me, sometimes things don't matter an hour later, and I still can stress about it, much less 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years down the road. Sometimes you just got to get our eyes off this moment of messes or chaos or not fun situations, things not going well, take in a bigger picture, and it wipes out our stress because it's really not that big of a deal. All right, here's the last one and the key one that we're going to talk about for a while. Number 10, get to the heart of your stress. Or you could also say it, get to the root of your stress. And what I mean is, picture you have a tree in your yard and it has a dead leaf problem. You could keep going to your tree and picking off the dead leaves one at a time. And you could do that, and that kind of fixes the dead leaf problem. But if you really want to fix the dead leaf problem, you need to get to the root of that tree and find out what is the problem. Get on your hands and knees, look at the dirt. Oh, the tree hasn't been watered in like 10 years. No wonder the leaves are dead. I need to start watering it. And you start watering it, and what happens? The dead leaves disappear. You got to the root of the problem, and everything else kind of came into place. Same with our stress. We can keep trying to look at the isolated, stressful situations and what do I do in that specific situation. But unless we get to the heart of why we stress, it's going to keep popping up because it's still in our heart, and so we're going to keep acting out on it. But if we can get to what's inside of us that's causing that stress, then we're going to naturally stress less. So we're going to take some time to walk through doing this. Look at your ideas on your page and see if there's anything common in them all. And maybe you won't see it right now. Maybe you're going to have to come up with more ideas on how you stress before you're going to see it. But let's go ahead and try it anyway. Is there anything that's similar? Or are there any things that you're thinking the same kind of thing behind it? You really got to look at each one and think, what am I thinking before I stress? What is going on inside of me? What are my feelings? What kind of things seem to be causing this? Or maybe it's just there's a lot of similar situations, like it's always when there's chaos, or it's always when there's too much to do, or it's always worry related, or it's always people's approval related. See if there's any categories, and maybe you have several, and notice, what is the root or the heart of my problem? And this isn't detectable from the outside. Your neighbor can't look at your paper and say, oh, I know what the root is. You stress about this, it must be this. Because no situation equals the same root necessarily. For example, let's say just a situation of the typical mom day with mess, chaos, and deadlines. Okay, so we have all these three things, and you could maybe have 10 people that don't stress at all about that stuff. And you could have 10 people that do. And of those 10 people that do, there could be 10 different reasons for why someone stresses. One person, because they value order and organization, and that's not happening. Another person, because they want control, and they don't have it. Another person, because things aren't going her way, and she's not happy about it. And then another person has this, and this, and this, and this. All 10 people could have totally different reasons for why they stress. And so what you have to do is figure out your reason for why you stress. Maybe you don't think they're all related. Maybe they're not. Maybe they all have their own root. But they all have something, that started inside of you. Certain thoughts that got it going, the wheel spinning, so that you started stressing. Okay, then what do you do with that? You finally figured out your heart. You figured out the root of it. Then you've got to attack it, which we will talk about how to do in a second. But I'm going to give you an example of how I learned this in my own life. Okay, so I told you I was going to Fresno a couple weeks ago. Not that trip, but the time before that, I went to Fresno. And the main difference between that trip and that trip was this time I was going by myself, and this time I had my husband. Totally different scenarios driving 3 young kids in the car. So the time I was going by myself without my husband, that itself just stresses me out. Just to think of driving in the car with 3 kids all the way to Fresno. But I tried to make this perfect plan, had it as set up as possible, had the car all set up, where they could reach toys. Everything was in their grasp, had a box of things that they could do, just keep handing it back to them. Especially my infant, I had her nursed so that we could leave right then, and then I'd only have to stop one time, and then I would get there before nap time, before they break down, because my kids never sleep in the car. Okay, so I had this perfect plan. Well, all of a sudden, after I nursed my infant, which is like the time to get in the car, right? Because everything's packed. My girls are excited. They're jumping off the walls. I don't know why. They're going to be in a 4-hour drive. They're excited about it, though, for a moment. And right then, something messes with my plans. My daughter showed a symptom of sickness that I'll explain later, but I found out it could potentially be serious. And right away, stress started setting in. Oh, what am I going to do? Do I wait to go to the doctor and then leave at some horrible time, like right when it's their nap? Oh, that sounds horrible. Do I just ignore it? I talked to my nurse friend, and she said it might not be that big of a deal, so should I just trust her? What should I do? Should I not go? Oh, I have to go. They're going to be so mad at me if I don't go. What do I do? And of course, instant headache as my muscles got all tense. Why did I stress out? Okay, so there's a situation. I had to figure out, why am I stressing? And I did, because I've been studying this, and I eventually got in the car, and I had like 4 hours to think about it. Why am I stressing? And one of the reasons, there was a few, but one of the reasons was because I had this perfect plan, and it was not going how I wanted it to. I thought I had control. I thought I knew exactly how it was going to go, and I was irritated that it was not what I wanted it to be. So what do I do with that? Well, I look at those thoughts. I think of those thoughts. Oh, I wanted control. Things weren't going how I wanted them to. I'm irritated about that. And I see, okay, are those appropriate thoughts? Are those true thoughts? Are those thoughts that I should keep? And if they are, okay, I keep them. But if they are not true, they're not appropriate, sometimes they're even lies that I believe, I need to get rid of those and replace those with right thoughts. And truly, the stress is changed by how I'm thinking. And so what I did, I truly did this, I had to think, okay, what are the right thoughts? The right thoughts are, okay, I don't think I'm in control. Right, I'm not in control. That is absolutely true. Why am I trying to gain control? There is nothing I could have done to change this situation. And I kept saying to myself, it is what it is. It is what it is. There is nothing I could have done to change it, and stressing does not help. And I seriously had to say that to myself a long time before I was like, okay, calm down. It is what it is. Nothing I could have done could have changed it. Stressing does not help. What I need to do is move forward and do whatever it is that's going to fix the situation. I just need to move forward. And that really did alleviate the stress that I had in me at that point. So you're speaking truth to yourself. You're looking at your thoughts. What is the heart of it? What are you thinking? And you're combating it with reality. And not letting, feelings get the best of you. I feel like it should be this way when it's not actually reality. You need to think right thoughts and tell it to yourself sometimes over and over again. Like, we tell our kids, like constantly, use your words, calm down, use your words, and then they start grumbling again. Use your words. You have to keep coaching them through it. That's kind of how we have to be to ourselves. Just keep coaching yourself through the right way to think. Okay, another situation that we could think through how to do this is if you get stressed about things not getting done. The unrealistic expectations you give yourself, you have those for yourself, and that stresses you out. Well, what you need to do instead of letting those wheels spin, I didn't get it done, I'm such a failure, all that stuff, you assess the situation, and you think, maybe there are things I could have done different. Maybe there are ways that tomorrow I will instead have a more productive day. But then, are there other things you need to take into account too, such as I have 4 children or whatever, or I have a sick child, or I helped a friend in the middle of it, or I had an interruption. And take those things into account and stop getting so down on yourself when there's other things that you should be thinking about too, not just that you're a failure, that you didn't do 35 things. You got to have these realistic thoughts rather than letting our feelings wipe us out. Okay, I have a chart or diagram, whatever you want to call it, that will hopefully solidify what this looks like, and hopefully you can use it in everyday life, picturing this and what the right way to think is. Okay, so we have a situation. Remember, situation doesn't equal stress necessarily. You can respond in stress, or you cannot respond in stress. The way that you will respond in stress is what we're going to look at right here, is starting with inappropriate thoughts. You can write this down if you want. There's only going to be like 7 boxes. So these are the first 2. So situation, if you have inappropriate thoughts, it's going to lead to stress, to feeling stressed. Such as my example in Fresno. I had these thoughts of, I'm not in control, things aren't working out the way I want to. And all of that led me to feeling stressed. And what does that lead to? But just reacting. I'm just reacting in a stressful mode. When my kids are asking me questions, from then on out, I'm reacting to things instead of acting, the way that I choose to. I'm just reacting. Okay, but it doesn't have to be that way, because I could take the situation and I can have appropriate thoughts, such as, yes, I'm not in control, there's nothing I could do to change it, it is what it is, and I should just move forward. Those appropriate thoughts lead to not feeling stressed, and I lived it out, so I can say it's true. And from there, you have appropriate action. So you're no longer reacting out of your stress, but you're able to just act. Okay, I'm going to give you another example that we can use this little diagram and see how it works. Say the situation is you said something to a girlfriend, and it was something like, I don't have time for anything right now except for my kids and taking care of my house or something. And that's a situation, and within the situation, you're not sure how she took it, okay? Your inappropriate thoughts could be something along the lines of, oh, she thinks I don't like her. She thinks I don't have time for her as my friend. She's not going to call me anymore. She's not even going to be my friend anymore. She's going to find other friends. And you go down that route in your head, and it starts making you feel stressed out. And from there, who knows how you act? Whether you're going to be her friend anymore, or you're going to treat her weird, or whatever it is. It all started with those thoughts where you assumed, oh, she thinks I don't have time for her anymore. She thinks I don't like her anymore. And that led you to stress. Okay, let's go the top route to see how we could have changed that. The situation is still the same. You said something to a friend. You said that you didn't have time for anything but friends or house, and you don't know how she responded. You could instead have appropriate thoughts such as, I don't know how she took that. She may have taken it wrong. She may have not. But what I can do is I could go home and I could call her, and I could explain to her, make sure she understands that's not what I meant. And if she doesn't believe me, then I'll just make sure I reach out to her a little bit more this next week, and she'll believe me. And if she doesn't believe me, then you got to show her this chart because she's getting stressed for no reason. Or maybe she's not a good friend to have. But you don't need to get stressed when you realize, okay, I don't know how she took it, but I can call her, right? I can change the situation. I can impact the situation in a positive way rather than just assuming, oh, we're not going to be friends ever again. Those are not appropriate thoughts because you said you don't have time for anything but kids in the house. But isn't that what we do sometimes? We take little situations and we think a thought about it and we go down this spiral until we're stressed out when that wasn't even appropriate thoughts to start with. We got to take those things, hold them captive, and instead turn them into things that make more sense, that are more in line with reality. We're not tricking ourselves. The truth is, you don't know how she responded. The truth is, you can call her, and you can say, if you took it that way, I really did not mean that. I actually need you the most right now because I do feel stressed out about time or whatever, and then you got to go to the chart for that stress as well of being too busy. But it's not tricking yourself. It's just thinking appropriate thoughts. All right, so everyday life, it really can be dealt with without stress. If you follow this, you can have appropriate thoughts and respond to life rightly. With everything that's on your plate, you can handle it. Okay, but I want to kind of take a side route here for a second, because as I look at this chart, I have to admit that there's certain circumstances where appropriate thoughts do lead to stress. And I don't know how to avoid it, that this has potential to be offensive, but I don't know how to get around this fact that appropriate thoughts sometimes do lead to stress. If you are a person that doesn't truly trust God with your entire life, I don't know how you can not stress about some of the most important things. Let me explain by my Fresno example. The other root of my stress in that Fresno example was the situation was my daughter fell off her bunk bed a couple nights before and hit her head in the middle of the night. I don't know how bad it was because in the middle of the night and I just heard a big thud. And that it was a couple days later, we thought we got her checked out. We thought she was okay. But as I'm getting ready to leave for Fresno, she literally all of a sudden, has this really hoarse voice. You're like, hoarse voice, she's sick. Well, that's what I thought, right? So I looked on Google, which is like rule number 11 for not stressing out. Don't Google everything. But I did. I Googled, but not to see what I saw. I Googled to see what kind of sickness am I dealing with? What kind of cold is this? What am I taking with me to Fresno? And of course, what popped up so quickly was if you have recently had a head injury or a head trauma and a hoarse voice comes on suddenly, see a doctor immediately. It could be your nerves constricting in your throat and your neck or something like that, where it's like things are not going well in this region, which is, of course, a scary thing for a mom to think about her children, that things are not going well in the head neck region. So that stressed me out. The other heart of my stress was not just that things weren't going well for me and that I was irritated about that. It was a worry and a concern for my daughter's life, really. What if I lose her? I can't go to Fresno being careless about it. And what if something wrong has happened with her neck? I can't just take it lightly. This is a huge deal. What appropriate thoughts can I think at that moment? Except for, I am the child of a good and powerful Heavenly Father. And He has the ability and the power to keep her safe. And if He doesn't, I can trust that what He chose was the right thing. He knows what's best. And that's the only truth that I can tell myself in that moment that's going to keep me from stressing. Because outside of that, that is an absolutely stressful situation. If I lost her, there's no hope. There's no hope without a good and powerful God behind that situation. And really, anything related to life and death, it should be stressful until you have some key things figured out. Stephanie talked a few weeks back about how there is truth and we can know that there is truth. And the Bible has really good reason to believe that it is true. And if you're not convinced of that, you should look into that further. But that truth makes a huge difference for eternity. And according to that truth, according to Christianity, you should be at total unrest. You know that definition of stress? You should be at definite unrest until you have figured out how to solve that problem that sin is separating you from God from now and for all of eternity. But what do we moms get stressed about, right? We get stressed about the little things, about the things that are happening all around us. And like when Natalie said a couple weeks back, sin is hindering our relationship with God. We kind of shrug that off, I'll be okay with God by my standards. And we don't get stressed about that. Those are the kind of things, the life and death stuff that we should get stressed about, not the everyday things that are going to be, meaningless in an hour or 5 days or 5 years or 10 years. That's the stuff that we get stressed about when it shouldn't be. Okay, so it's probably not what you wanted to hear in a how to be stress-free talk, but I didn't know how to avoid it. When I was working it through my own life, I could not figure out, how do you not be stressed when you're worried about life and death? There is no way. But I'll jump back to everyday life stuff. We've got to learn to stop stressing about that stuff, right? I mean, our kids, they totally remind us of this. Mine do. 2 and 4, they're learning all these new things, different challenges like buckling their seatbelt. That's the hardest thing for one of mine. And she gets so stressed out about it. She starts kicking her feet and grumbling and going crazy. And what good does that do her? It does her no good. She's only further from buckling her seatbelt. And I have to stop them and say, does grumbling help? And then they hopefully stop their grumbling and they try again, and then they can do it. What's really cool is I'll sometimes look in the back and I'll see my oldest one shaking her hands. I'm like, what are you doing, Bailey? And she's like, I'm shaking it off. And I'm going to try again. It's like, all right, you got it. Shake it off and try again. And that's the way we've got to be with ourselves in these everyday life things, is we got to shake off the stress. It's not helping. It's doing us no good. And hopefully something on that list will move you forward in that process. You think of that junior high girl that I mentioned. One day she's going to get from here to where you're at, and she's going to look back and go, I was stressed about 1 project, 2 projects. She's going to say, I'm managing my house now. I'm having kids. I'm going to taking care of, Christmas shopping and throwing Christmas parties and all this stuff. She's going to get to that point. But we all, right, can get further along too. We see those people who they just handle life with a calmness about them. And we want to get further along down the road so that we can also handle all that's on our plate with that calmness without being uptight constantly. So I'm normally the one that comes up and says thank you. So thank you, Heather. Now you can